I'm in touch with this group, the ex-Muslims of North America, which has been, for reasons easy to parse from the title, have security concerns, and when they try to book an event at a university, they're now finding their events canceled the moment people figure out, who they are, but it is they have the legal right to free speech. There's no law against criticizing Islam, but people have just discovered that it's so inconvenient to incur these security concerns that you have a de facto loss of that freedom.
It makes me wonder about, this actually came up in a couple of discussions. I had Mohammed Syed on the show recently, and yesterday I moderated a debate between Faisal and Azra Namani. There's a lot of different perceptions about what Islam is and what Islam isn't. If I'd have said that faster, it would have been a good tongue twister. You would think that if we exercised our moral outrage against problems fairly, that it would not be the ex-Muslims, the ones who are trying to point out the problems, who end up deplatformed. That there would be enough, I realize I'm being a little idealistic and wide-eyed, that there would be enough genuine concern about humanity that we could have conversations on important topics and not be sidelining the people who are actively trying to work to fix the issue, because not every ex-Muslim is reactionary. Some of them are reformers or attempting to.
Well, of course. There was a terrible episode in London School of Economics when Mariam Namazi, who is, I suppose, the leading ex-Muslim exponent in this country, was giving a speech, and she was barracked and heckled, and more or less the thing was closed down by a group of Muslims who came and I think tore out her microphone, tore out her PowerPoint so she couldn't speak, and she courageously soldiered on. But what was truly distressing about that was that the feminist society of LSE came out in favor of these Muslims. Feminists of all people who you would think would be disgusted by the sorts of way women are treated by Islamists. That I think was what was truly awful about that episode of, at LSE.
Yeah, it's a point that people don't tend to notice, but the ex-Muslims are actually the most vulnerable and beleaguered community, because apostasy, as I'm sure everyone here knows, is thought to be punishable by death under Islam, certainly most interpretations of it. And so here you have a community that is threatened by the religious community they've attempted to leave, and many of these people are in the closet, they can't use their real names, and yet this is precisely the community that is attacked as Uncle Toms or racists or colonialist shills by so-called liberal non-Muslims. So they get it from both sides, and they have virtually no sanctuary but the secular community.
This came up yesterday, and because I mentioned reformers, I thought maybe I would toss it out there. You may or may not have a strong view on this. Is there value in encouraging reform of Islam, and particularly extremist varieties of Islam? Or is that like trying to reform young earth creationists so that we end up with old earth creationists or day age creationists? Is it a better tactic to just continue to demand evidence for bad ideas and expose them, or are we willing to accept a softer, gentler version of Islam?
Well, I think we can move on both tracks at once. My friend and collaborator Majid Nawaz is very much on the reform side, and his answer to this is, if you think reform is hard, just imagine trying to get 1.6 billion Muslims to apostatize, which is really the alternative. But obviously some people will apostatize when they're convinced that there is no God or no book could have been revealed by him. So I think you can make the argument both ways and simultaneously.
Yes, I mean, the same argument comes up in the creationism debate. Should we ally ourselves with relatively sensible Christians who actually accept evolution, or should we say the whole of religion is bunk? And I mean, I have collaborated with bishops in opposing creationism, but on the other hand, I get what Matt is saying. If you encourage the sort of soft, wishy-washy Christian who actually accepts evolution but thinks somehow God had something to do with it somewhere along the line, maybe that's more damaging, and it's better to come out with all guns blazing against religion altogether. And I've done it both ways, and I can't decide which is the best.
The Reverend Barry Lynn is the current or former president of Americans United for Church-State Separation, and we shared a stage at a Secular Student Alliance event. And I like him, and we get along, and he's working on behalf of church-state separation, so it's great, but we disagree vehemently on whether or not there's a God. And so I told him that I have a goal of changing the entire world. I'd like to get rid of bad ideas, including religious ideas, wherever I find them. But I told him that his soul was safe from me because I want him as the theist supporting church-state separation that I can point to. So his will be the last soul that I try to debunk, so that we can continue to work together towards a good goal. So if it's the case that we can work down multiple tracks, one of the things that came up is, I talked about intractable minds, the ones that may not change. The thing is, I can't tell the difference. If there's two people standing in front of me, and one of them truly has a mind that will not be moved, and the other one could be changed, I can't tell which one's which, and I'm not necessarily sure that it's true that neither of them can change their mind. So I go with this assumption that their mind can be changed even if it's not by me or not right now. And if there's somebody who I can't affect, my goal becomes to try to change the world around them by dealing with the minds that can be changed. For both of you, when you've both had conversations with people who could best be described as brick walls, that you might as well have had the conversation on your own rather than to engage with it. What do you take away from that? How do you, does it get discouraging? How do you battle the frustration of the perceived futility in the moment against the clear advances that we might be making?
Unfortunately, Dan Dennett is one of my brick walls on the topic of free will, and I'm his. Well, I think the one thing to notice is that, as you say, it's not always about changing someone's mind in the moment. I mean, people tend to like to change their minds in private, and that's, I mean, there's a kind of a faith-saving aspect to this, and there's just, you know, kind of the water on the rock process where you might not be the final moment that changes their mind, but you're part of a process. So I'm always impressed, and I think we've talked about this as well, how few experiences I have where it's clear that someone came into a conversation with a very strongly held opinion, and by some process of reasoning, they, at the end of the conversation, totally disavow it. I mean, I think I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
But you and I are just inundated with the testimony of people who have changed their minds on these core issues through some process, and then the process often entails reading books or hearing debates, so it's like watching seeing a supernova go off or something. I mean, they're going off all the time, but we're not seeing them.
A few years ago, there was a talk at one of the atheist conferences by a man. His talk was called "Don't Be a Dick," and he produced what he thought was an absolute slam dunk argument. He said, "How many of you in the audience, if somebody called you an idiot, would change your mind?" And of course, nobody would. But I felt that was a very unfair tactic, because if I tell somebody he's an idiot, and I don't do quite those words, but if the effect of what I'm saying is that he is an idiot, I admit I'm not going to change his mind. But if there are a lot of other people listening in, say it's a radio audience, I mean, you've probably done by now, I know you've done things where you're talking to one person who probably is an idiot, and yet you know that there are but there are hundreds, thousands of people in the radio audience listening in.
Yep.
You haven't changed the mind of the idiot, but you've probably changed the minds of all the other people who are listening
Yeah.
at the same time. And so this
This is